For years, Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz explored the country trawling for the most valuable junk they could get their hands on, while Danielle Colby held down the fort at home. Mike and Frank, the two stars of American Pickers, were simply one of the sturdiest duos in reality TV. But then everything changed. Frank unexpectedly disappeared from the show. Tensions were at an all-time high with the cast, and it seemed like the show would collapse altogether, finally turning to junk. So today we're gonna find out what really happened behind the scenes on American Pickers. What happened to Frank Fritz? Did Mike really betray him? Is Danielle telling the truth about the downfall? And what lies in store for America's favorite junk-finding show? The story of American Pickers isn't just about finding cool stuff, it's a dramatic tale of blood, backstabbing, and betrayal that would make a king blush. Before we dive in, please hit that thumbs up icon to show us some support. And subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Now let's dig up the truth one piece at a time and go find out.
What happened?
A sudden disappearance. Mike and Frank have been starring on American Pickers for a very long time together, since 2010 to be exact. And during this time, it seemed obvious that the guys were old friends who enjoyed working with each other. But was this really true? Recent information suggests that a dark truth lies beneath the carefree image of this show. The first sign of trouble appeared in March of 2020. Frank was on the 7th episode of season 21, but was nowhere to be found on the 8th one. But the weird thing was, nobody acknowledged Frank's absence. Not the show's producers, not Danielle, and not even Mike. So rumors began circulating that Frank had been badly hurt in some accident. Then another episode aired, and another. The rest of season 21 was utterly Frankless. But true fans of the show and that dynamic duo hoped and prayed that Frank would return for season 22. But unfortunately, he had yet to return. And no real acknowledgement was made until July of 2021. Finally, fans got some news that explained Frank's shocking disappearance and called into question the future of the show. A shocking revelation. In July of 2021, the world finally learned what had picked Frank off American Pickers. But it wasn't even Frank that initially reported the news, it was Mike. Mike announced that Frank would be leaving the show, but it wasn't immediately clear why. He was vague about the reasons, only alluding to poor health and serious problems with addiction. Now, it was well known that Frank enjoyed to drink, but nobody had any idea how bad things had gotten. And it wasn't just that. Around March of 2020, Frank suffered a serious back injury. He was forced to undergo surgery and received 185 stitches and 2 rods in his back. In his statement, Mike was very supportive of his former partner, calling him like a brother and wishing him the best. But he was also harsh in his judgment of Frank, saying, quote, "We all do care about Frank and we want him back on the show, but he just can't get it right. Frank is just going through a lot personally with addictions. It's unfortunate that he's made decisions that have him the way he is. But Mike is just one guy. So was Danielle more sympathetic to Frank's plight? Well, no, not exactly. In fact, Danielle's take was even harsher than Mike's. She said, quote, "Frank caused so much pain for himself that it has been hard to watch." She alluded to pain and suffering that Frank has caused, leaving it up to our imaginations what actually happened. Because behind the easy-going road trips portrayed on TV, it appears that some serious trouble audiences were unaware of was under the surface. That Frank's personal problems had sabotaged both his own health and the well-being of those around him. But now, Frank was indeed paying for them. But that wasn't even all there was to the story, and far from it. Because Frank had a different perspective on things, to say the least, and when he finally spoke his mind, he did not hold back. Frank speaks out. While Mike's statement portrayed himself as an old friend that just wanted the best for a struggling pal, The other part of the duo, Frank, saw it a little differently. While both Mike and Danielle were basically calling his health spiral karma for his own bad choices, the lovable Frank told a much different story. One of cruelty, deception, and betrayal. In this interview, Frank let loose on Mike, saying he and Mike were never friends, that Mike had never said a kind word to him, and that Mike never even reached out after Frank's injuries. Because of this, they had not spoken in 2 years. Frank also claimed that rather than succumbing to addiction, he had actually recently quit drinking, began to eat better, and lost a whopping 60 pounds. Frank's exact words were fantastic, saying, quote, "Mike's statement was bullshit. Somebody wrote it out for him," which is also pretty funny. He also hinted at establishing his own show, one in which he would no longer play second fiddle to Mike. Then Frank said some more troubling news, hinting that Mike had wanted to force him out of the show for a long time, to replace him with Mike's brother Robbie. But before Mike or Danielle could respond to these fiery allegations, something kind of horrible happened. One that would upend the stability of not just the show, but Frank's entire life. Less than a month after these shocking allegations, amidst all of this mudslinging, there was fresh news. No, the gang had not patched things up, and Frank was not returning to the show. But Frank's health had even worsened. He'd been hospitalized with a stroke. Now, there was definitely no chance of Frank returning to the show anytime soon. Of course, Mike and Danielle both extended well wishes, but the damage was already done. Frank Fritz was moved into a rehabilitation facility where it seemed he'd be there for a foreseeable future. But the show must go on, as they say, so how would American Pickers respond? Well, the producers of the show were about to make a big change, one that would shock audiences and push the show to the brink of disaster. In July of 2022, new episodes of American Pickers aired. So would Frank be making an appearance? No. In fact, his allegation a year prior that Mike wanted to replace him with Mike's brother seemed to be very true, as it was now Robbie Wolf who was also starring alongside Mike. The show also brought in the role of motorcycle expert Jersey John. The producers of the show seemed to agree with Mike that Frank was a liability to the show, easy to replace. So how did fans accept this new change? Well, they weren't exactly thrilled. In fact, the show garnered its worst ratings ever. Things were so bad, the network temporarily paused releasing new ones. And it seemed like after 23 seasons, the show was inches away from being ended. Now, executives did not go that far, and the show finished out the 23rd season. It seems they've decided to continue full steam with their original plan, and season 24 is currently airing, with the brother Robbie still in the spot where Frank once stood. Of course, only time will tell if the show can really continue without Frank. Will it crumble in his absence or find some new footing? And what stinks about this is that Frank is still trying to crawl his way back towards good health. But he's faced several setbacks along the way. Frank Fritz needs serious medical help to recuperate from his stroke and is reportedly suffering from seizures. And while Frank has banked quite a bit of cash from his years on the show, this intense medical care is dealing him a beating financially, and worst of all, adding insult to serious injury. Frank was placed under a temporary conservatorship, similar to the one that famously bound Britney Spears. So now there's an even longer path back to the throne for Frank. But one thing is for sure, if he's able to defeat these obstacles, there will be hell to pay on American Pickers. Alright, now we need to hear from you all, the audience. What do you think? Who do you think is really telling the truth? Are Mike's allegations that Frank is simply reaping the fruit of his addictions true? What about Frank's claims that Mike is a power-hungry sociopath, only looking out for his last name? Finally, what about Danielle's statements? Is she taking the easy road just to stay on the show? Get in the comments and tell us all things American Pickers. Before you head out of here, please hit that thumbs up icon to show us some support. Subscribe to our channel and come back often so we can keep telling you
What happened?